I wanted to fulfill a promise to somebody I made. I said I would, inshallah, one day I would play in Turkey. And so I wanted to fulfill that promise. And now after my first concert, I feel very, very, very good and very relaxed.
Hello, you are listening to an Anadolu Agency podcast. I am Sefa Şengül.
And I am Faruk Çalışkan.
And we are hosting a very legendary name, Mr. Yusuf Islam. Thank you so much for being with us today. I have to admit that a dream has come true for me because you are our childhood hero. And I'm very excited to be with you today. So, very welcome. So, you are an inspiration for many of your followers and your audiences, regardless of time. So you have been in Turkey for more than a month, right?
Well, actually, I've been coming and going. I went back to Dubai. I came here to see everything, and then I went back to Dubai, and then I come back again.
Okay. And you performed a full show last Wednesday. Could you tell us how was your feeling when you performed at your very first concert in Turkey? Because I know that you love being in Turkey, and how did it make you feel?
Well, it was a little bit strange because it's after 5 years. My last tour was in 2017 in the US and in Europe, and so I hadn't been on stage for some time, and I was getting used to the comfort of domestic life. Yeah. I think COVID made us all kind of isolated and very insular.
Yeah,
and I was getting and I was getting used to that, and so. But I like to put my foot forward, and trust in Allah that what I do next, inshallah, will be good. And so it was because I wanted to fulfill a promise to somebody I made. I said I would, inshallah, one day I would play in Turkey, and so I wanted to fulfill that promise. And now after my first concert, I feel very, very, very good and very relaxed.
Yeah.
See what love did to me. It was a surprise when you sang it. It was written by Yunus Emre, who is a great poet in Anatolia, Anadolu, and Islamic history. Was it your first time singing it? How did you feel when you read the poem first time? Did you have inspiration from Yunus Emre?
Yes, I like to get inspiration from many places, and of course, when you read Rumi or Yunus Emre, you're always uplifted to a new space of awareness and consciousness. Love, particularly, the issue of love, which a lot of people, when they look at Islam, they don't see that at all, and so this is one of the things that we have built within. Our culture, and the poets such as Yunus Emre, just exemplify the most perfect form of that expression of love within Islam, and devotion and detachment from the world, And that's why I was inspired to write that song. Love lit me red. It's a magnificent word. I love those words.
So, do you think it's because of Muslims or the prejudice against Muslims when they talk about Islam, they remind us of all violence?
Yes, well, recently I quoted, I said, I was a bit brave, coming to Islam. I was a bit brave, I was a bit courageous. And then the question, I know there was some puzzlement. Why should you be brave to become a Muslim? Actually, if you think about it, the amount of negative images and rumors which have been constructed, to barricade people away from the true light, and the warmth and the mercy of Islam. So that, of course, was built really, I would say, deliberately, to keep people away from Islam. And you can look back at the Crusades and you can see how the Crusades began. They didn't know anything about what was happening in the Holy Land, how peaceful it was with Muslims living with Christians, with Jews together in, and harmony. and they wanted to start a war, and there was some political reason for that, and so they did that. So all these negative images, you can see that. Also, my background as a Greek, my father was Greek Cypriot. You can imagine that, there is a lot of ignorance about, that they say, oh, Muhammad went to the moon. I say, no, what are you saying? They're talking about Isra and Mi'raj. They don't know. So it's a matter of education. But yeah, I had to be a bit brave to walk through the doors of the mosque that day on Friday, 23rd of December, 1977.
Yeah. So, Mr. Yusuf Islam, I want to make it deeper. You said, as far as I remember, a month ago to our colleagues, I was brave enough to become Muslim. This is what you told last month to our colleagues at Anadolu Ajansı. Do you think converting to Islam takes courage at that time, especially?
It was maybe easier for me because at that time there was no Iranian Revolution. This was 1977. Everything was like, there was Oriental carpets. Yes, there was Turkish delight, and there was, curry and all this. Islam was seen through the eyes of a racist view. So you're either from Asia, Pakistani, or you're Turkish, or you're Arab, or whatever. So therefore, it wasn't quite the same. But after 2 years, then the Iranian Revolution really brought down a black curtain, and that curtain then hid all the beauties which I had learned through the Quran, reading the books about Islam, and first the Quran. So that obviously took. It wasn't as dangerous maybe at that point. Then people, of course, started to look at Islam differently politically. And that was where the change came, and that's where a lot of people needed to wipe their eyes, and see Islam for what it is. It was difficult for many.
But I want to add a question. Oh, MFR. Okay, I'll go. So, how about today's world? Because the Islamophobia spreading around the Europe, especially, this is really hard to live in Europe for becoming Muslim. What do you think about in this time, at the moment?
Yeah. Again, we have situations. It's a complex situation in Europe. It's driven mostly by economy, and so if there were just streams of Arabs and Turks bringing in money, to build. But now you see refugees coming; they have no money, So therefore, it's an economic thing to say, "Oh my goodness, it's going to cost so much to have these refugees and to look after them." You look in Turkey, you can see you have millions of refugees, and it's difficult. But there is this generosity, there's this openness and responsibility. So I think that Europe. It's playing a very strange game because it likes to say that we are the best society in the world, and that's why the refugees are going there. But then they shut the door and they say, no, you can't come in. So what does that mean? A bit selfish, I would think.
You have a project called Peace Train, but there are still lots of wars going on in many regions in the world. Now we have war in Ukraine, very close to Turkey. Britain is very much involved with the confrontation there. You once said, peace cannot be achieved by doing nothing. Peace is more than that. What is this peace train about? Which path is that going to take?
Well, it's obviously it's an ideology, not an ideology, it's a dream. It's something that we long for. Probably it's in our DNA from when we were created in the garden from Adam and Eve. We belong to a peaceful, environment. That's where we began. And so I think we're always leaning and wanting to go back there. That's what the peace train represents. But, in the world, so we were then sent down to the world. So that the world is not going to be an easy place to live. And today, for instance, while armies and banks run the world, I just don't see the peace train, having any station to arrive, because there's so much control of those two kind of entities, the money, and the force, power. So anyway, but we do what we can. So Peace Train has turned into an initiative that I try to feed people, because I base it on the saying of the Prophet, peace be upon him, feed people and spread peace. And how can you have peace if you're starving? So, it's fundamental. So we do what we can, and of course I'm giving dawah in many ways, trying to show what the Peace Train represents through example and through education and charity.
Charity is the focus of the activity.
Yes, it's basically charity, and and I would say that education is also part of our obligation. If you have knowledge, that's a zakat you have to pay as well. You have to give your knowledge as well. So it's all charity in one form or another.
Yeah. Meanwhile, since we just mentioned peace, I have a follow-up question about this. I spoke with my father yesterday, and I told him we were going to have an interview with Yusuf Islam. He hesitated to recognize you, and initially I added, Cat Stevens. He was like, "Oh yeah, of course, wow." So I want to ask you that. Wow, this is a really deep question, maybe, but has Yusuf Islam made peace with Cat Stevens, and what has Yusuf Islam been seeking recently?
Well, that problem that you just expressed when you try to define who I was, so you know me as Yusuf Islam, and then but your father, remembers me as Cat Stevens. So that's why I put my two names together, to make sure people don't miss me, one way or another. I want them also to understand that, my evolvement from Cat Stevens to Yusuf Islam is an evolvement. It's not as if I changed. Well, of course I did change, but in the way that I reformed.
You describe yourself and Cat Stevens and Yusuf Islam, or you bring together two names?
I brought it together just as a kind of an easy way for people to remember who I am. And most people, they remember me because they never met me, but they remember me through my songs and through my words. And so if I say I'm Yusuf and they don't think that I wrote those words, well, that's not right, because I did write those words.
Yeah, of course.
And so I'm trying to make it easy for people to connect. Those are the two things which perhaps the media creates one kind of image of one kind of person, and it's very difficult to do this. But this is why I put the name Yusuf Cat Stevens.
Yeah, okay.
You came to Ankara for a concert, which is part of Ankara Culture Road. It's a festival. And your Istanbul concert took place in Atatürk Cultural Center. We usually call it AKM, AKM. Did you like the venue?
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, it has a stage as large as a football field, which we could not fill. So we had to, cut it in half or a quarter or whatever. But the actual building itself is so beautiful. And that's actually, it's given us lots of inspiration as well. When we come to Turkey, we see how it's developed. I began in 1980 walking the streets of Istanbul, and believe me, you couldn't walk on the pavement because there were so many broken, slabs, and everything was in a state of disrepair. And the difference, I think a lot of kids now, or millenniums, or whatever you call them, those children who are born, after that period, or born in the 80s, they don't know what it was, and now everything looks, hey, this is what we used to, hey, we want more of this, but you've got to appreciate how it's developed, and I've seen that. It's inspirational for me because we have a centre in UK. We're trying to develop also, we call it the Maqam Centre, based on the place where Abraham, began to build the Kaaba, called Maqam Ibrahim. And we want to make that a beautiful centre, and we've been very inspired by the buildings that we see in Turkey. We have a Turkish architect also to help us.
Yeah, Faruk, do you have any other question?
Yeah, proceeds, the money collected from your concerts will be donated to Peace Train. Will you be involved in new social projects or fundraising campaigns in the future? But I understand from what you're saying, you are not going to mess with politics, just charity and promotion of peace, as far as I understand.
That's what I believe good politics is, you know. I don't see any other reason to talk about politics because, yeah, I mean, we have this project, the center, and I will be, you know, trying to raise money for that. I will probably do some tours, maybe I will raise some more money from that, and maybe others will want to contribute. We also have a beautiful school center which we want to redevelop. And so those kind of projects are the things that I'm looking at in the future.
Okay, I think we're done, and that was a brilliant conversation with Yusuf Islam. Many, many thanks. I know you had a very tight schedule, but you made it real for us. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Please follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever you listen to us, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.